Now, the team behind me has diligently set up, as you can see, for a panel discussion. This is going to be really exciting. We are welcoming back the moderator from this morning, A.B. Sam Thomas. He is, of course, the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Middle East. He's going to be comparing a discussion with the following special guests. I'll announce them all together and then we'll welcome them on stage. We have Hina Dixit, partner of Microsoft Ventures US, David Gurle, who's the co-founder of Perzo, Symphony Quest Partners Hive UAE. Do let me know if I pronounced that properly, but I'll let you take over. Constine, who's SignalFire editor-in-chief at TechCrunch from the US, Ming, CEO of Tribe from Singapore, a suitably international, illustrious speaker list with our wonderful moderator as well. Please do give them all a warm, warm welcome. Thank you. Thanks again, AB. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you.
Hello again, everyone. Nice to be back on the 10X stage once again. Since we are running short of time again, it seems to be my luck today. I'm going to dive straight into the discussion. We're talking about generative AI. As I'm sure everyone here knows, it's one of the hot button topics. We literally had an assembly, Dubai assembly for generative AI just last week. And we're going to be talking about these topics today with a great panel of speakers. Thank you, Amandeep, for the introduction. And I don't want to waste any time, so I'm just going to just dive straight into it. And maybe Josh, as my first person, a former editor-in-chief, editor-at-large at TechCrunch, and now working with SignalFire. Can you perhaps just give us an introduction to yourself and your company with respect to it being an AI-driven venture capital firm, but also give us an idea into the state of GenAI as an industry right now, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Josh Constine. I'm a venture partner at SignalFire. We're a $2 billion early stage venture fund based out of San Francisco in the United States. And we've been building AI to power our investment efforts as well as to help our portfolio companies for over a decade now. So we specifically build AI that can track incredible founders and amazing companies. We crunch 500 billion data points to rank 600 million people in the tech ecosystem on skill level and hireability, which allows us to see, hey, this is an incredible person who's left one of the top companies in the world. They're hiring incredible talent, which has high GitHub ranks, or their website is suddenly popping up in WebRank. And so through these kind of quantitative signals, we can tell our investment teams who are the best people to reach out to. AI will never tell you who to invest in, but it can definitely tell you who you should talk to. And then we also use the same AI to help our portfolio companies. So we built an elite talent search engine that they can use to find the best people for any given role, not only the ones that are already looking for a job, but people who might be seemingly happy at a job, but we know they're going to move soon. Either their company is hemorrhaging talent, or they haven't been promoted very frequently, something like that can tell us, hey, this person is actually on the market even though they don't say so on LinkedIn. And so putting that together, you're really able to build a venture fund supported with technology and humans to help portfolio companies, as well as to find the best companies before anybody else. And I think with the state of the generative AI industry right now, certainly incredibly frothy. We saw a massive spike in interest earlier this year from venture funds. Though what we quickly saw was that a lot of the startups were actually not quite deep technologies as much as just thin wrappers around things like ChatGPT. And so when we're looking at the generative AI industry, we're looking for 3 specific things in startups: a proprietary data moat, a workflow feedback loop, and a performance feedback loop. And so what that means is we want a startup to have its very own data, something that OpenAI, that other major AI platforms don't have access to, so that they can produce results and serve companies that those core large language model foundational model companies can't provide. Second, we want them to have a workflow feedback loop. That means that when you're using the AI as an enterprise user or an end customer, what you put back into the AI helps train the model. So if it gives you back some text, you're actually able to flag what's wrong with that text to keep on improving the model. And then the third thing we're looking for is a performance workflow, or sorry, a performance feedback loop. That means hooking the AI into the actual real world results of its outputs. So if you're generating ad creative via AI, this AI should jack into your Facebook ad dashboard and tell, these are the ads that actually got the most clicks. These are the ones that performed the best. These ones had the highest ROI, to train the model to keep on building more of those. So I think if you can build those proprietary feedback loops and those proprietary data moats, you will have something that is hard to copy and much more interesting to venture capitalists around the world.
That brings me to Hina, the perfect touching base point, actually, when it comes to the venture capital space. Again, Hina, if you can just quickly give us an introduction to your enterprise in terms of Microsoft Ventures, and talk about how you are looking at this space. What is interesting to you? And like Josh just mentioned, it's an extremely frothy space right now. How are you deciding which is real and which is not?
So hello everyone, and it's a pleasure being with you all here today. I'm from Microsoft Venture, and we typically invest in multiple areas. We are very diversified. AI is one of the areas where we are strongly investing in. I recently joined M12 as a matter of fact, and prior to that I was at Samsung Next. I used to head AI investments there. And the thing that we are currently focusing on Microsoft Ventures is mostly finding the next cutting edge technology.
Closer.
Okay. So we are trying to invest in the next cutting edge technology. I feel like there are a lot of debates around whether what particular technology is actually worth investing in and what not. People are trying to invest in the entire pipeline of AI. But at the same time, we are also recognizing our consumers as well as businesses, and we're trying to understand the needs. How can AI help them do their mundane task much better? How can we bring the research work in AI, which is the cutting edge, to our consumers? It could be as simple as creating your slide deck, or it could be as simple as any of the features that our recently released Copilot has. So I feel like any missing piece in the puzzle is worth investing in, worth encouraging founders to move forward and work their way in that tech.
Thanks, Hina. Ming, over to you. Again, maybe just first an introduction to Tribe and what it does, and again, how are you seeing developments in this space, given the entrepreneurs you work out of from Singapore and, of course, the rest of the world?
Yeah. So thanks, everyone. Really great to be here. My name is Ming. I'm from Tribe. And Tribe, we deal with the business of talent, right? And specifically software engineers, right? So we support software engineers to look at new technology, new tools. And one of it definitely over the last 1 year has been on the AI space itself, right? We're looking at different emerging tech, right? And AI this year is definitely one hot space itself. And I think we've been seeing a lot of interesting problems and use cases being solved by AI, right? But I think there's also a lot of use of AI in the wrong way itself, right? So I think a lot of the things that we are looking at today surrounds about maybe 3 different areas of challenges itself. So one area will be the data challenge of AI, right? Second challenge will be the computational challenge, and third area is the talent challenge. So on data challenge itself, we are looking at it more to process data is expensive, right? And sometimes the quality of data might not be there, right? You need heavy infrastructure, and this might not be accessible to everybody itself, right? So this links to your data and computational challenges itself, that it's not so easily accessible. And you talk about data privacy, you talk about where the data sources are coming from. These are all challenges that the industry is still facing, and especially the black box challenge that everyone talks about within the AI space itself. And I think Josh mentioned earlier, can it be improved, right? Can new data sets come back and it forms a flywheel itself, right, from a data model perspective. And last part of where we are looking at challenges would be the talent space itself. So are we able to educate not only just developers with new tooling in the space to make their work easier, but also educate mass population, right, to make their work AI augmented, right, but not AI replaced. right? So allowing them to understand the benefits and the cons of how to use AI ethically and safely itself.
David, I want to get your input here. You're a serial entrepreneur. We're talking about Symphony, of course, and there's also Hive that you're leading currently. As an entrepreneur in this space, again, if you can just give an introduction to your ventures, of course, but also talk about how you are making use of AI, and how do you see it, revolutionizing or changing the industry?
So, hi everyone. I'm David Gurle. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I invest in about 10 companies in the board of those companies, and there is not a single company who is not paying attention to AI. But paying attention to AI is a word that can be qualitatively interesting, but quantitatively undefined. So my approach, as I advise those organizations and the founders, is to understand the real benefits of it, I would say, from a quantitative perspective. So for me, there are kind of two axes for AI, which I define as augmented intelligence versus artificial intelligence. One is that, can it augment my organization in a way in which I can do more with the same number of people? So in other words, if I have 3 people, 4 people, can I do the job of 6 or 7 people? And so that is a form of augmentation. We are obviously in the application universe of AI, not the core infrastructure universe. So going back to Josh's example, technically with his existing organization, he could analyze more data with the use of AI than he could do without the use of AI. So that's one axis. And you can measure it. You can say, let's run this thing for a quarter or 2 and see what is the end game from that, and see we have increased our number of people, our virtual people, powered by AI tools. The second axis is, okay, I still have the same number of people, but I'm not going to try to increase the number of tasks that they can achieve, but I'm going to do it faster. And so in this case, we are in the speed advantage. You can also measure that. You can say, let's pick a developer use case and let's look at test automation. And you can measure how long it takes to generate automated tests based on your current velocity, and then you add the, Copilot or your favorite generative AI tool, and you can see that actually it's going to be much, much faster. So the reason why this is important is to make sure that the organization that is embracing those are then enhanced, kind of like with steroids, and they are becoming superhuman. And enabling basically the right type of arbitrage for the CEO. Because at the end, you need to make a decision, and where do you want to put the dial on? You want to put the dial on more productivity, and you want to put the dial on more speed, and hopefully both. So I think we are in this era, and it's fascinating.
Let's talk about this. Again, we've been talking about this quite a bit already, like how it has become such a appealing topic for not just investors, but also for entrepreneurs playing in the field. But I also want to, challenge that notion, like how much of it is just a buzzword and how much of it is actually real and something that we should be pushing forward. Even like when I was preparing for this panel, there's one report saying it's a market worth billions, another one saying it's trillions, so the numbers keep changing. How do you see this happening from your perspective as SignalFire?
I think the age of AI that we are in right now is that AI is confined to the chat box. And that's the biggest mistake that the industry is making right now. We need to liberate AI from this chat box and bring it to where people are actually getting utility out of it around the world. So you can take an example like Grammarly, one of our portfolio companies. They're, I think a $15 billion company on the last valuation, and specifically what they help you with is spelling, grammar, tone, and writing suggestions. And sure, you can get some of that from ChatGPT if you want to constantly copy and paste into ChatGPT, then paste back out to wherever you are, and that's not really going to work on mobile as well. It's going to be very cumbersome. what Grammarly realized is that you need to put AI in people's hands wherever they need it. And so instead it offers a desktop app, a mobile app, a Chrome extension, a browser extension, so that if you're in your email, your text messages, writing on a Google Doc, wherever you are, you can get these writing and spelling suggestions. And so I think that's the next age of what we're going to see AI do, is escape that chat box. And the second big thing is the heavy verticalization for enterprise SaaS. And so right now we saw this early wave of startups like Jasper and Writer, these very broad horizontal tools that can be used by almost any business. And sure, there will be some success stories there, but oftentimes they're hardly better than just using that ChatGPT tool. It's hard for them to stay above the level of the foundational models because they often have access to the same data and they're only learning how to do every use case in a shallow way. And so instead, I think the next big era of AI is in deep verticalization for enterprise. You look at companies like EvenUp, which is AI for personal injury lawyers. And specifically what it does is it calls together all of the personal injury settlements and tells a lawyer, this is how much this case should be worth, so that they can negotiate to get justice on behalf of victims. That's a data set of private settlements from law firms that EvenUp works with that OpenAI doesn't have. It's writing these demand letters that sort of bring the case to insurance companies and say, this is how much you owe. It's getting that feedback loop in the workflow of the lawyers are reviewing that and making changes for it so that it can understand. And then it also understands, did the lawyer win the case? Did they get that big payout for the victims? And so by using that performance feedback loop, it's specializing and getting deeper and better all the time as well. So I think the next big era is not going to be, oh, what can I do with AI? It's going to be, I am a deep expert in a specific enterprise field, and now I'm going to use AI to do things not only just faster or with less headcount, but things that simply could never be done by humans before.
Josh, I just want to question that also. Given the names of the companies that you have invested in part of your portfolio, what is the range of the ticket sizes in terms of investment? And I want to post that question over to you as well. How would you decide? Maybe is there a range you can say in terms of how much money is being put into these companies?
I think we're certainly seeing early stage companies with a big vision being able to raise at higher valuations than in other industries, because there is a sense that AI's potential is uncapped. And so previously, people would be judged more on metrics at that early stage, and instead, we're always excited to invest in companies at a very early stage, at seed stage, and sometimes even before. But I think that because of that unended potential, there is a fever for investing in these companies at higher valuations. Yeah. But I think also what you're going to see is that companies that gain traction, because this is a greenfield space, there are so many new verticals to be conquered that if you can get out there and prove that you are becoming the default for your industry, even if you have just a little bit more traction, a little bit more momentum than another company, then investors are starting to say, hey, it looks like this could be the big winner. And so even though the market is still developing, even though the companies are still small, if they have that momentum and investors believe in the market, they're willing to bet on them. So I think even showing that little bit of momentum is important. And that's why I always encourage AI startups right now to think about go-to-market from the earliest days. You should be building your channel partnerships, your product-led growth, your viral feedback loops into the product from the earliest days. And if you can even just sign a few of those amazing pilot customers early, you might be able to suck all the air out of the room and make it so other startups in your same space that are competing with you have a much harder time to raise capital.
Hina, question for you. Again, the same thing. When you are evaluating startups, how are you deciding on ticket sizes and stuff like that?
So I think the ticket size depends on a lot of things. First thing first is, what is the requirement of these startups, right? How much do they need for compute? How much money do they need for hiring the right talent? And that could also mean that, okay, this much money is needed for preparing a proof of concept, or just getting our MVC out. We have started investing in pre-seed and kind of seed stage, where we are seeing companies pre-product, great team, pre-revenue, but at the same time, they want to hire the right AI researchers as well, right? And those do not come cheap. So you need to be able to if you are an entrepreneur out there, you need to be able to figure out what exactly you want to do in next 6 to 7 iteration and plan your milestones and say, hey, okay, these are my hiring milestones. This is the money that I'm going to need for it. Then you're going to look at the compute, okay, like, like the model that we are working on, either we are going for an open source and we are trying to fine tune that model on our own data or specific data, and then figure out the compute and see if you can get any strategic investors like us, and we help immensely with that. Of course. So that is another thing that you have to think of.
Basically, you're calling for trouble. They're going to flock at you like the minute you get off stage. David, same question really. In terms of, again, based off your entrepreneurial experiences, again, for a company to get into that growth phase, to get into that scale-up phase, so to call it, what's the kind of capital they should be looking at? What would you advise people to look at when they're, venturing into that growth kind of market?
I think that fail fast and don't be embarrassed with releasing your product early so that you catch the market feedback. I think most importantly, it's not really catching the market feedback, but it's having an organization that can execute regardless of what's happening in the market. One of the challenges is that you have conflicting priorities in early stage of companies. They have so much to prove, and with a number of unknowns. And in a situation of unknowns, I think it's better to force your hand to know the unknowns rather than try to second guess them that it might be that, and then keep iterating until you think it's the perfect solution, and then it's too late. You run out of money, out of runway, and you made a mistake, and it's too late. And so my biggest ask to every startup I work with is have a release cadence, hopefully daily. And it's a big undertaking to release daily. There's so much factory work that you need to do, which is not valued even by the VCs. That's not the first question they ask you. They don't say how effective your organization is releasing the product, getting the market feedback, fixing it, and releasing again. That's not the question they ask. They ask mostly about, well, who are your customers and what they're going to take. But the underlying question they are asking is exactly the factory. And the best founders, the best teams, that's the first thing they focus on. And once you have that, I tell you what, execution beats strategy every day. And having worked at Microsoft for over 5 years, I can tell you that at Microsoft, we rarely got the strategy right. But we got the execution really, really good. And iteration after iteration, well, guess where the company is today. So that's, I would say, my take on this quintessential startup problem.
So I was on a panel earlier this morning, and yeah, we were literally saying the exact same thing, like fail fast, release it as quickly as you can, and then test, experiment, and so on. Sorry, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I just think one thing that I have seen kill so many startups is overinflating their valuations, especially for seed stage companies. When you set too high of a valuation for yourself, what you're effectively doing is setting the finish line so far ahead of yourself that no matter how fast you run, you won't get there. And so we've often seen companies that have great early momentum, a really great team, a smart product, but when they set their first, their valuation too high, what that really means is for them to be able to exceed that valuation and raise that next follow-up round, they have to execute absolutely flawlessly. And so even if there's a small hiccup in the macroeconomic market, if there's an unforeseen change in the core technologies, or if they just go down the wrong path of monetization or go to market just slightly, they may not be able to live up to that valuation, and they might end up with a flat or down round, which can create this death spiral for startups where, first of all, it seems like they're losing momentum, so they can't get as good of investors, and then employees start to leave, which makes it tougher for them to service customers. The customers start to churn, and it can all come crashing down so quickly. So I recommend startups much better to set a more reasonable valuation that you're going to be able to blow through and raise that next round on a sense of strength rather than desperately clawing trying to get up to the valuation that you set for yourself.
Ming, same question really. I was going to ask you about valuations and how do you see it given the entrepreneurs you work with?
Yeah. So I guess this is definitely a breakout year for generative AI, right? And led by Microsoft as well with the OpenAI investment, and recently Amazon on the Anthropic investment itself. But I think if we take a step back from that question that you asked itself, right, instead of first looking at valuation, I think CB Insights did publish a document itself and a report that 30% of generative AI startup are in the bootstrap stage itself. And a lot of them didn't choose to take the first investment capital at the early stage. And I think that's actually quite interesting, right? Because focusing on the unit economics of the business model and then maximizing the equity later on in the growth stage, that might actually be a better choice, right? And even to VCs itself, right? Because they gain more confidence in the product, they get better product market fit, they test their product, we know that it works, it serves a big market, and that's where they come in to raise their capital and then maximize their equity itself, right?
I mean, we are already seeing that, I think, like, given the funding winter, so to speak, is we have seen that move away from that growth at all costs kind of thing and moving towards profitability, which is a great thing in my personal opinion. And again, from the panel, that's what I'm hearing. We are running out of time. I'm going to try to open up for questions in like 2 minutes, but just a quick roundup for all of my panelists. Again, talking to the entrepreneurs in the room, working in AI. If there's some absolute do and absolute don't, what would that be? Maybe Ming, I'll start with you, and Josh will end with you. Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree that I think some of the panelists mentioned it's all about execution, right? I think execution definitely beats strategy. Focus on the unit economics of the business model. If you're going to spend 10x dollars just to market X revenue, then it's useless, right? Itself, like what you mentioned, we are not at a growth at all cost mentality. It's about team, building the right team to come together, right? So I always talk to startup founders and I say, hey, think like how Web2 businesses are built, because the business model and the go-to-market has been proven, but then use your new technologies to push it out to the market to get your adoption itself, right? And to get people to use your products because it's more efficient in the market itself.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's about building a good business at the end of the day. Hina, go ahead.
So I would say do not go after the higher valuation. Instead, try optimizing for your equity dilution. The other thing is you need to find early on strategic investors who can find who can help you with your compute needs. They can help you with co-designing or being your co-collaborators. They can serve you more than just bringing a check on the desk. So get more investors involved in such a way.
Basically, look for smart money. I think that would be the right way. Go ahead, David.
If we agree that any company, any team can achieve anything given enough time, I think the most important asset that startups forget is the time. And they need time to build a team, to build a factory, to fail, to learn. And they often forget in that equation the management of the investors. And so there are existing investors, and they need, and their expectations need to be managed on a very, very regular basis. And then the fundraising starts for the next round as soon as the first one is actually stopped or has been released. So this isn't like I'll go and raise my next round in 18 months. No, you already need to know who you want in 18 months. And then you are working with that future funds from day one all the way to the fundraise, so that they know where you started and where you land. What you shouldn't do is just forget about the investors, exclusively focused on doing what you said you're going to do, and then come back and disappoint them with obviously something that you might have not achieved. If you have overachieved, fantastic. But there are many scenarios in which you are optimistic and you're going to underachieve, and that's okay. But you still have made progress. So manage it well.
Josh, yeah.
Yeah, I'll give you 3 things. One is multi-cloud strategy. The second is being aware of incumbents. And the third is finding VCs that can actually help. So what I mean by that is that we are not in the era 10 years ago where incumbents are asleep at the wheel, where they don't see these new technologies coming, where they're slow to adapt, where they're afraid of potentially disturbing their existing users or their existing business. They know their lives are on the line, that AI is going to change everything, and if they don't build, they will be replaced. And so you can no longer predict and bet on the major incumbents like Google or Meta, or especially companies like Adobe, to not integrate AI into their core products. So you can't just say, oh, I'm taking what they're already doing and I'm doing it with AI. Like I saw a company that's doing Canva, but with AI. It's like, Canva is going to be the Canva of AI. It's not about being you need to find definitely a totally different customer set and a different type of product. You can't just be doing what incumbents are doing a little bit better. The second is multi-cloud strategy. If you want the cheapest cloud compute, you need to experiment with a bunch of different clouds for every different use case, for training data, for inference, for customer data, to be able to understand where do you get the cheapest rates, and you need to be changing that as you develop through your stages. If you just search compute shortage, you'll find an article from SignalFire that talks to you about how to find the best compute resources for the cheapest, because we see startups burning so much of their capital and suddenly having to go back and ask for more money before they've actually made a lot of product progress because of that. And then the third thing is that because on top of your go-to-market model, on top of your product, you have so much engineering risk of actually building something unique with AI, that you need to be so focused on that you aren't going to have time to be quite as focused on things like recruiting, PR, and other functions. So find venture funds that can specifically help you with that stuff, because they're not going to be able to spend every day in, day out with you engineering your product or figuring out exactly your product strategy. And in fact, throwing money at a product doesn't get you to product market fit. But instead, think about the things that you normally have to contract out to a vendor like PR, or that you really have to spend a ton of your founder time on, like recruiting, and get help from them on those from a venture fund like SignalFire that specifically helps with those functions, because otherwise you're just going to be drawn in too many directions to keep up with the ridiculous pace of this industry.
Thank you so much, Josh. I think we have time for questions. Anyone, just raise your hands, and I'll get a, can we get a mic over to her, please? Here in the front. Can you just introduce yourself and then go for your question?
So I'm Maria, I'm from Norway, and I'm a CEO of a startup. So my sort of question, because I kind of know what Microsoft Ventures go around with, but I also know about NVIDIA Inception. And my question is like, for the multi-cloud computing, if you have a Microsoft-centric, how can you provide that? Where like NVIDIA providing the chip, and they're allowing you to like explore multiple clouds. So why would I go for like Microsoft instead of NVIDIA if NVIDIA already has an Inception program for like providing the whole environment? That's why I didn't go for Microsoft Ventures. So that's my question.
So I'm not the spokesperson for Azure Cloud, but in general, like Microsoft Venture Fund, like M12, we try to help out like the startups that we invest in, figure out a good deal with our compute team. Or we also have like another program which is Microsoft for Startups, and using that we can help you it's like a founders hub, and we can help you get some free credits. Up to 150K worth of credits are given for free, along with some other services as well.
I think you hit on a really good point, though, that strategic investors, whether they're major corporations or venture funds based out of corporations, if they lock you into specific vendors and reduce your agility and the ability for you to shift on a dime when something changes, that's a problem. You want to make sure that often if you are going to take those strategic investors, try to take a few within that industry. That way it doesn't look like you're playing favorites, because then eventually if you want to sell to one of those companies, they're going to say, oh no, you're an ally of our competitor, rather than, oh, you're agnostic and neutral across the industry.
Any other questions? Sorry? Oh yes, there's a gentleman there on the third or fourth row, I guess. Yeah.
Hello. I have a quick question for you guys. While AI offers a lot of hope for youth people, for startups and things like that, but the key ingredient in AI product is data. A massive amount of data is truly the basic necessity of any AI product, and most of the time this data is actually belongs to larger companies like Microsoft, Google, things like that, and it makes it very difficult for startups, true startups, to start off with a very limited amount of data. So while this is opening new opportunities for startups to think differently, but at the same time, it seems to me that only large companies, regardless of their other resources, such as computing power and things like that, they have specific and unlimited access to very clean, polished data that no one else could ever have. So it's kind of like a monopoly for those larger companies to utilize AI to further improve their position in the market. So this is a big challenge for us.
So I guess the question is, as a startup, you need access to data. Where do you get this data from?
Exactly.
Yeah, go.
I mean, I think you need to be partnering with businesses which have that data, but it's very fragmented. So even up, for instance, this legal AI for personal injury SaaS, they went to every different law firm and say, hey, you have a handful of settlements of personal injury cases, and you don't actually know what like if somebody breaks their arm in a car accident, you don't know what that's worth because you've never done one of those cases before. But one of these other law firms has, and by collecting a little bit of data from a whole large number of businesses, you can build a data lake that's powerful enough to produce real insights. So, and often that's the kind of data that's locked up and not available to those big corporations. So I think if you can find a model where customers actually provide you that proprietary data in exchange for potentially discounts on that service, that data for discounts model is going to become very popular in the AI world.
Awesome, brilliant.
I think I can add to your question as well. So I think, like, real power of data comes from personalization, which means, like, personalizing the AI for the needs of specific customer who is using, like, that particular AI model on their laptop. And I think that will only, like, be done using some of the techniques like federated learning and using some data privacy based model training techniques, right? So if you can use some of those techniques like differential privacy or like federated learning, then your eventual mode becomes the customer, like your own model, which is already trained and personalized for the needs of specific customer itself. And then the model starts working better for the, individual customers as you go. So probably that is another option for you to look at.
Thank you so much for that question. And we have run out of time officially. Thank you to this great panel of speakers. And again, thank you to the audience for being a part of this conversation. And yeah, back to you, Amandeep.
Thank you.